Well, he is jumping on. So maybe just so we can get started, I just wanted to say thank you all for joining us. This is our very first virtual event like this. I've never ran a Zoom meeting before, so please, be patient with me. I've been on a lot of Zoom meetings, but never actually run one. But kind of how it's going to work, we're going to give you guys some time at the beginning to just go through, introduce yourself, tell us what you're working on this session. We'll do Q&A towards the end. And so if you do have a question, please just hit the raise your hand button and we'll kind of move through the list of those and make sure everyone has time. And we will ask you to maybe just keep your answers to 2 to 3 minutes so we can get through we actually do have a lot of people on now, about 15. So that's great news. And we really—
Hey, Evelyn.
Yeah.
I just got a text from a constituent that says the Facebook link requires a passcode. Does that?
No, it shouldn't. They should hit launch meeting, and every time Zoom kind of adds it, there should not have to be a post. As long as you're just an attendee, there's no passcode. So I think if they hit launch meeting, it should work.
All right. Okay.
So yeah, so we're just going to kind of move ahead. I think hopefully Representative Stoddard, we'll have him maybe just go at the end. But let's start with Representative Spinlove, then we'll go to Representative Harrison, and then Representative Elison. Oh, and there he is. There's Representative Stoddard. Great. We're glad he's here. And yeah. All right. Wonderful. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here this morning. At least, everyone at home didn't have to come into City Hall. They can watch from their pajamas. So that's the great thing about these virtual meetings. It's much more convenient. And again, so thanks again for being here. And let's start with Representative Spinlove.
Well, thanks for having us. This is, I wish we could be there in person, but our new life is going on Zoom meetings.
Yep.
And I really appreciate Sandy City doing this, and especially Evelyn, everything you've done to put this together. And we're really lucky to have Evelyn at the city. So what I want to kind of talk about just real quickly is some of the things. I'm not actually working on them, but several of I shouldn't say I'm not sponsoring them, but I'm doing a lot of work on them. The legislature has a real effort this year to cut taxes, and there's kind of three main bills that the House is focusing on right now. One of them is to remove the tax on military retirement, and this is something we've been working on for several years. This is House Bill 161 by Representative Perucci. This would exempt veterans pay from the income tax, veterans military retirement from the income tax. This would cost about $24 million. Utah right now is one of only 2 states in the country that fully taxes veterans military income. And so we're going at that one, trying to get that one passed into law. That one is moving along well. It's already passed out of committee. It will be heard before the full House, and then probably next week. The second one is taxation of Social Security benefits. Again, it's another one that we've been working on for a while, and it was part of the overall tax reform that we had a couple years ago, and we're bringing it back, and I'm very confident about this one as well. So this would cost about $18 million. And this one, some of these are funny that you say, well, why haven't you been able to get it done yet? But the problem is, it's just the ongoing revenue is always a little bit harder to get funded. But this one, the argument for it is pretty simple. If you're on Social Security, you've already been taxed. You were taxed when you were working, and then when you retire, you shouldn't have to pay taxes on it again. And so we'll be addressing that. That one is actually already passed out of the House and is in the Senate now, and I feel pretty good about it. Third one is a dependent exemption, addressing the tax on dependent exemptions. And this one is probably going to be a Senate bill. There's already a Senate bill from Senator Fillmore, SB 100, and Representative Moss is the House sponsor of that. And that's to address the inequity that was created with the 2017 federal tax reform. If you remember, the federal tax reform essentially got rid of the dependent exemption. And because the state is tied to, and most states are tied to federal law, it largely got rid of it in the state of Utah too. And we said, well, the feds may want to get rid of that, but we in the state of Utah recognize that that it's an important exemption for people to be able to have on their taxes. And so that is probably going to be about a $60 million no, that is right, $60 million. Right now it's a $40 million note, but we're going to make it even a little bit more generous and go to $60 million on that one. So there's a lot of focus on kind of reducing taxes. We've got extra money this year, and we want to send as much of that back to the people and to our constituents and to the taxpayers in the state of Utah. So I'll just kind of end with that.
That's great. And if people at home don't know, Representative Spindlove really is kind of the go-to tax reform guy. He worked really closely in the Huntsman administration on tax reform back then. And so now you've got the maybe unfortunate job of always having to be involved in the complicated tax issues, but you do a great job, and we're grateful that you are there with your knowledge to look at this, because I think no one doesn't like tax cuts. So
Thanks, Evelyn.
thanks. All right, we'll go to Representative Harrison now.
Thanks so much. And thanks to Sandy City for hosting this. This is, I think, a great event where all of the different representatives and senators who represent our community can come together and have a more broad discussion. I appreciate Representative Spendlove's kind of highlighting some of those areas that we're working on as a body. I absolutely support, in the past, I was a co-sponsor of that legislation to reduce and eliminate the tax on Social Security benefits. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill to eliminate the tax on retired military benefits. I think there is broad consensus and support on these areas that we do need to have tax policy that looks out for those that are on fixed incomes and our seniors that are often struggling to make ends meet. And I really appreciate the great work that's being done in that space. In terms of things that I'm working on this session, I have several bills to help address the cost of healthcare and help people afford really expensive medications this year. The first one has to do with, it kind of started a year ago, the legislation that Representative Norm Thurston passed to let patients purchase insulin at a discounted price. It's helped over 900 Utah patients. The program is available to anyone who needs insulin and is having trouble affording it through the PEHP, the Public Employee Health Plan website. The bill I'm running this year is the same program, but for another very expensive medication called EpiPens or epinephrine auto-injectors. They're life-saving medication for people that are having life-threatening allergic reactions. And the problem is they're so expensive that often people are foregoing purchasing them or replacing them when they expire. So it really puts families and patients at risk. This bill will help people be able to purchase those life-saving EpiPens at a discounted price. Another bill I'm working on is to help save taxpayers dollars and save our state budget some money in terms of allowing our public employee health plan to go into joint purchasing agreements with other states to save money on expensive medications and, increase our negotiating power as a state. So much of healthcare is about strength in numbers and increasing your negotiating power and increasing competition in a system that's often lacking in competition. So this bill will help us save taxpayer dollars by increasing that negotiating competitive spirit in purchasing medications. Another bill I'm working on is to help patients. We've done a lot of great work in the state on helping patients with diabetes afford necessary medication, but we need to do more on helping people avoid developing diabetes in the first place. This is largely avoidable. Type 2 diabetes can be avoided through lifestyle choices and education and just changing some aspects of how we live. so that we don't get these diseases that really negatively impact our health and our lifespan, and also healthcare costs. So this bill will expand the opportunity for patients to take a diabetes prevention class, and it will be paid for for Medicaid patients that are eligible. And just moving upstream a little bit, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And this will ultimately help improve patient quality of life, but also help save tax dollars by avoiding those very expensive diabetes treatments. I have an emergency management bill to make sure that we are doing everything we can to be prepared for the next emergency, and have better communication from the state all the way down to municipalities. It's not a controversial emergency management bill. It's a bread and butter, like how do we, fix the things, the nuts and bolts of things. And then I have a bill to shine the light on campaign finance reform. This last year was a concerning year in terms of a lot of kind of shady campaign tactics and kind of nasty mailers and campaign materials that were going out anonymously. It's against the law to send out these types of materials anonymously. The law states you need to put the name of who is paying for this and who's responsible for this. Every year the law gets broken, and this bill will create a penalty for breaking the law, because we all need a vibrant discussion of issues and a debate of approaches and policy approaches. But what we don't need is nasty campaigns and smear tactics using anonymous campaign tactics. The voters deserve better. Utah deserves better. And this bill will shine a light on that kind of who the bad actors are and create penalties for that kind of campaign tactics. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate you as a doctor being kind of a watchdog up there for patients, and you really have been a huge value. When you have that kind of experience, it does lend to better legislation. So we appreciate your efforts on that. All right, Representative Ellison, you're up.
Thank you, Evelyn, and thanks to Sandy City for hosting us this morning. We obviously prefer I'll speak for myself, prefer the in-person town hall like we did last year, but obviously things have changed, and hopefully with the vaccine rolling out the way it is and case counts going down, that next year we'll be able to resume our in-person meetings. So thank you. Some bills that I'm working on, one bill that's gotten a fair amount of coverage, it's called Sarah's bill. It's HB 47. That's just the informal name I've given it. It's a driving under the influence bill that changes what happens to a defendant if they have inflicted serious bodily harm or have caused a fatality. The young woman, Sarah Fry, that I've named the bill after, in fact, it was her family that brought forward the idea, was a cheerleader up in Davis County in high school this past summer, coming home from Bear Lake, was hit by a drunk driver, her and her friends. She's subsequently had 20 surgeries, paralyzed from the waist down, and had to have both legs amputated. The individual that caused that accident had a blood alcohol level of 0.22, and he was let out of jail before even seeing a judge, and before he was even sober, from what we understand. So this bill would simply say, if you cause a horrific accident, crime like that you will stay in custody until you can have a hearing before a judge, and that judge can determine if you are a safety risk to either yourself or the public. That bill is passed unanimous all the way through the House and through a Senate committee, and is waiting its final hearing next week at the Senate. Interestingly, we do have Sarah joining us in the House chamber on Tuesday. About once every 2 years, we get to ask somebody to open the session with a prayer and somebody to say the pledge. And Sarah and her father are going to be joining us, and she's agreed to offer the opening prayer for our session. So another bill, DUI bill, creates a new category of offense called extreme DUI. A young person who is 3 times the legal limit of intoxication can be almost 500 times more likely to cause a fatality than somebody who's just at the legal limit. And so what this bill does is it focuses on the most dangerous individuals on our roadways. And if they have a blood alcohol level 3 times the legal limit, or alcohol above the legal limit, as well as a controlled substance in their system, it creates a new category. It enhanced penalties. However, it does give the judge discretion to order the individual to treatment, which is so often really what they're all in need of. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be in that condition. That bill has passed through the House unanimously, and is now, I think it's Monday or Tuesday, we have a Senate hearing. So some important public safety bills there. A bill that I ran last year that passed through the House, and due to budget constraints didn't make it through the Senate last year, would create a new state park in Utah called Utah Raptor State Park. It's adjacent to Arches National Park. It would create a separate, actually there's already a separate entrance into Arches that few people know about, would provide camping opportunities, which are very sparse in Moab. It has a former Japanese internment camp, so historical significance. It has one of the world's largest repositories of fossils in terms of dinosaur bones, the Utah Raptor, which is coincidentally the state dinosaur. And it also has a lot of biking trails and ATV trails. About 6,500 acres would be the size of this new state park. It's important, though, for me to know that the locals wanted it. So I asked the chair of the Grand County Commission to have their commission vote on it, and they unanimously voted to have this new state park in their county and strongly support it. The bill will also create an additional state park called, probably proper pronunciation is Lost Creek, but locally it's named as Lost Creek. It's a state park, or excuse me, it's a recreation area in Morgan County that's being overloved and undertaken care of. And so this would allow the state to put some resources to take care of that valuable resource. In one of my assignments in the legislature, I'm the co-chair of the Public Education Appropriations Committee. A bill that I've sponsored in the House that has already made it all the way through the process and is just waiting the governor's signature is our base education bill. That was really a historic bill that increased funding for public education, increased what we call the weighted pupil unit by 6%, which is a significant increase. It also had about 120 million for teacher bonuses that obviously it's been a difficult time for teachers to teach in person and online and hybrid. We wanted to recognize their fantastic efforts, including other school employees, not just teachers. There's paraprofessionals, bus drivers, lunch workers, so many people that bring our schools together. So I think Utah may be the only state in the nation that is actually increasing funding to public education in the midst of this pandemic, instead of cutting funding, which so many states find themselves in. I have several mental health bills. For sake of time, I won't go into those. One suicide prevention bill, one bill focusing on childhood mental health, which is just extremely important to catch those issues early. And another one relating to confidentiality of mental health records. And so just, I guess in high level summary, those are some of the bills and issues that I'm focused on.
Well, I mean, all great bills. I think with COVID, we realized how important our outdoor spaces are. And with COVID, we've also realized how much mental health is important. So appreciate those efforts, definitely. All right, Representative Sutter, you're up.
Well, thank you for having me today, and I apologize I was a few minutes late. My
No
computer
problem.
decided that my legislative email needed to be really slow. Um, so a couple bills I'm working on that I'm very invested in are dealing with police reform and how victims are treated in the criminal justice system. So I've got one, HB 59, that just passed out of committee unanimously, is now waiting to be heard on the House floor. And it prevents anyone involved in the criminal justice process, so police, prosecutors, defense attorneys, clerks, judges, anyone from sharing a victim's intimate images that they may have contact with as part of their role in the case. And I'm really excited about that one. It came out of what we learned in the Lauren McCluskey case and how that evidence was mishandled. I had a press conference last week with Representative Romero and the Speaker of the House, and the Speaker signaled his support of this bill. So hopefully we can get it through and get it passed. Another one I have is HB 62, which changes some of the requirements that Post can investigate. Post is our police certification entity for the state. So they're the ones who decide whether a law enforcement officer's certification should be revoked or suspended. And what this bill does is it makes it so that any findings from a court or a law enforcement agency that an officer has been deceitful or dishonest can be investigated by Post. And as a prosecutor, this is important to me because I want to make sure that my witnesses are known for telling the truth, that they don't have this history of deceit and dishonesty, because that's something that actually ethically we have to turn over to the defense if there are those types of findings. It would also allow Post to investigate any findings by a court or a law enforcement agency of bias against a protected class. And so I think this is a small step. I've got the support of the Fraternal Order of the Police. I've got the support of Post. I've been working on the language really closely with our district attorney as well as our AG's office. And so I'm really excited about that one as well. Like Representative Harrison, I also have a bill dealing with emergency powers, and I'm very interested in this issue and hope this bill can create some transparency in the way that our emergency procurements are made. So when the executive decides to enter into no bid contracts, and that bill passed out of committee unanimously last night. So those are a few of the things I'm working on that I'm really excited about.
That's great. I think that's maybe kind of leads us into maybe more broader discussion. We have, I think, something like 80 law enforcement bills this year. And so I would love to maybe just kind of hear from you guys. I think what I have seen, and I think is a good place to be, is that you have police coming together with legislators, you have, cities coming together, everyone kind of coming together to come up with some really great reforms. And it seems like, that's the way to do it. At least both sides are kind of realizing that we could use some reforms and there's better things we could be doing. And so I do appreciate kind of the efforts on both sides to move us to a place where we maybe have a little more transparency and a little bit more accountability. So if you guys, if anyone wants to jump in here, love to kind of hear your thoughts.
Can I chime in on that?
Sure, yeah.
I know I just spoke, but
yep.
So I sit on the Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Committee, and we hear these bills. We started hearing them this past Thursday, which ended up being like a 4-hour committee meeting, which was really long. But it was incredible to see how willing a lot of the parties were to make concessions, because you have, the police who understand their role and they have some pushback about some of the bills, and then the activists who are pushing for broad reform. But there's this huge middle ground where I think that there's a lot of people who are willing to work in, and I do think that we'll make some pretty significant progress in the terms of what we're doing. I know Representative Romero has some wonderful bills about data collection and reporting that would require officers to, just write down and report whenever they unholster a taser or unholster their firearm. And I think things like that if we can get data and start looking at it in the long term, will really help us in our policing.
And it seems to me that police, they don't want the bad actors either, right? I mean, and they make everyone look bad. So it seems like there is obviously a will to make sure that people who aren't performing their duties correctly have accountability and transparency there. So I appreciate that. Representative Bill, were you gonna?
Yeah, well, and I just think this is a great example of where we can have bipartisan support from the legislature. It was great to me to see that the speaker essentially, spoke out and endorsed 3 of these bills, and all 3 of them just happened to be sponsored by Democrats in the House of Representatives. And so often, I think in these type of areas, people try to drive us apart and try to, push people into their corners. And I think there is, just like Representative Stoddard says, I think there is a lot of area for us to come together and for us to build consensus on these important issues. And so I'm really excited to see where this is going.
Great. Representative Listen.
Yes, I have several bills in this area also, not maybe quite as complicated. One will require the Peace Officer Training Academy post to train officers on how to work with people with special needs. I've got a child with very special needs and know a lot of families that have family members with special needs. And we obviously had a really tragic case of a young man with autism being shot this summer or this past year. And it's going to be important to give officers additional training on how they deal with individuals that are dealing with some sort of a disability. So that's just a focus on training. I have another bill, forensic DNA privacy amendments, that tries to set parameters around when law enforcement and in what methods can access certain data. This is an area where science has created the need for additional legislation, as if somebody leaves DNA at the scene of a crime and it doesn't, if they match that against the federal CODIS, it's the criminal DNA database, and there's not a match, they're now able to start looking in genealogical databases and looking for relatives that may be related to somebody who has committed a murder or a rape, and use that data to solve the crime. So that it's important to set some parameters around that data. And so I think that, we'll see some good reforms coming to law enforcement, but it's also important to know, the law enforcement, that we support them. A bill I ran last session, the would create a new program called Safe UT Frontline. It's an app that law enforcement, firefighters, and healthcare workers can download and speak with a licensed clinical social worker 24/7, 365 on an anonymous and confidential basis. It's built off the same platform and program that the very successful Safe UT program for Utah school children was constructed and fashioned. And so that program is now live. If you know somebody that's a healthcare worker or first responder, I'd encourage them to, or encourage you to encourage them to download Safe UT Frontline. And it's a free resource that will help a lot of these people that work in some really difficult professions.
That's great. Well, transitioning a little bit, I know that a lot of our residents are watching really carefully kind of what's happening to the canyon and transportation options there. So I just wanted to maybe talk to you guys about, what you're maybe hearing that may happen at the legislature this year in regards to that. I think certainly we all know that we need to have some sort of a solution, especially when we see traffic backed up clear to Highland Drive and 94 South on big ski days. So if you, whoever wants to kind of, interject on this, what will maybe happen in the legislature this year as far as maybe some solutions for dealing with the traffic there?
I can jump in on that one.
Okay, great.
And just like you said, Evelyn, this is a huge problem, especially in Big and Little Cottonwood Canyons. What was it, 2 weeks ago on that snow day? That the worst situation is when you have a Saturday snow day.
Right.
And on that Saturday, a couple weeks ago, I had a friend who was going to ski at Alta, and it took him 2 hours to get up the canyon to get to Alta. And then when they arrived, all the parking spots were taken, and they literally had to turn around and go home. And that's an example of a system that's failing. Mm-hmm. And we've got to get serious about addressing that, especially with the population of Utah is increasing very quickly. The population of Salt Lake County and the Wasatch Front is going up, and it's an area that that we need to be focusing. So there's kind of long-term solutions that we've been working on for a while to address the canyons. We have a Central Wasatch Commission that is meeting regularly to look at what do we do for the long term, and that there aren't any specific solutions that they've decided on yet, but I know that some things they're focusing on is do we try to expand the road to allow more cars to move up there? Do we have bus rapid transit, or increasing and encouraging people to take the bus more? One idea that is being talked about a lot is building a gondola to kind of bypass the road and be able to get directly up the canyons in that way. But and those are all, I would say any of those solutions are really kind of 5 to 10 years down the road. But the problem is right now. And so one of the things that I've been working on, so just for people that aren't too familiar with the legislative process, there's kind of two ways that legislators can have a direct impact, and that's either you can sponsor a bill or you can sponsor an appropriations request. And so I have working with former Mayor Ralph Becker and the Central Wasatch Commission, we submitted an appropriations request that will do a couple things. It actually does three things. Number one, it will fund a survey, a really in-depth survey and analysis of the visitation and the use of of the canyons, saying, okay, how are people using it? What do they want? How do they want to be accessing these resources? The second part is $50,000 to fund. It's essentially to fund off-duty police officers giving buses a police escort up the canyons. So, if you think about it, whether you take a car or whether you go on the bus right now, it's going to be the same amount of time. And we want to be able to send the message that to people to go take the bus. And so if on that snow day a few weeks ago, you line up, 3 or 4 buses, and then the police escort them past the cars up to the resorts or the other areas, that helps send the message to people that you need to be thinking more about taking the bus. And this is kind of an unrelated, but it's similar. One of the big issues, especially in Little Cottonwood Canyon, is graffiti. And these beautiful historic areas like the Temple Quarry Trail are just being destroyed by graffiti and by people that just don't care about our environment. And so this funds $5,000, and most of the people working on this are volunteers. Mm-hmm. Volunteers are going up, cleaning up the graffiti, but the supplies that they use are pretty expensive. So this will give $5,000 to provide those volunteers with the things they need to be cleaning off their graffiti. So that's just kind of one area that I'm kind of focusing on.
That's great. I think it's a very out of the box solution. I haven't heard that about the police escorts. I'll be interested to see how that works out. I think it's great. I mean, it's a very immediate solution to this problem. So that's great.
I have something to add on that. I agree with Representative Spendlove. We have to find ways to encourage people to get out of their car, to get up the canyon. And also, I think that's the most cost-effective way. I agree with his suggestion of let's do a survey and study this before we throw hundreds of millions of dollars at something that hasn't been studied in depth, like a gondola system. I'm not saying I'm opposed to that, but that we need to be very thoughtful about that and make sure we've maximized other much less expensive options. Along the lines of how to get people up the canyon faster, another idea that I have heard that I think is really interesting for all those powder hounds out there, if we created, the first several hours of the morning when the powder is the best, if we allow only buses to go up the canyon or a car full of people packed to the brim, that's another way to incentivize people to get out of their car and onto a bus and minimize the impact of so much traffic on our canyons and those neighbors that live along that Wasatch Frontier, that Wasatch Boulevard area. So those are some other thoughts.
Great, I love it. Okay, well, if no one wants to add any more to that, let's move over to some questions from the audience. And so if you have a question for our representatives, just go ahead and push that raise hand button and we will call on you. Bruce Wood has had his hand up for a while, so we're going to start with him. So Bruce, you won't be on camera, but you will be on audio. So I'm going to allow you to talk right now.
I just unmuted. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Everton and all you representatives. I'm a resident of Little Cottonwood Canyon at the mouth, just off of 209. And you basically got into the issue I wanted to raise, which was the EIS project currently underway under the auspices of UDOT. And I'm pleased to hear Representative Harrison's comments about looking for cost-effective, common sense solutions. So I don't want to spend too much time trying to get into the gory detail of the 5 alternatives that UDOT is very competently and very credibly investigating at the moment. So I guess my specific question is, since our governor has already expressed an opinion on the solution or his preferred solution, perhaps prematurely, because the process is due to end in the middle of the year. My question is, he's included a $50 million appropriation in his budget towards this project. And my question then is, what is that appropriation for? And how is it being used to either progress this EIS project and hopefully come to a common sense solution? And maybe Representative Spenlove could take the first whack at it, because he is indeed our representative. And I speak as a citizen, but also as, at least for the most part, representative of some of the concerns of my neighbors in our little area in the just above the triangle, as it's called. Thank you.
And Bruce, before you jump off, I have a question, because I don't know what the governor has said. That he's expressed a preference for one of the choices.
In the Deseret News back in January, he said he leaned towards the gondola solution, or a gondola solution, since there are 2 of them, which, as I said, is a little premature, seeing as the UDOT folks and associated consultants are hard at work fleshing out those alternatives, costs, benefits, environmental impact, of course. And it just surprised us as local residents. And I, for one, don't look forward to seeing 50, 60, and 70 meter lattice work towers out our window going up the canyon. And that's why I'm on this call, essentially.
Well, one of the good things about the legislative process is that the governor has a voice, but he has one voice of 104 different voices. And so the governor can, and I don't know the context of what he said. That I'll have to go back and look. But I can tell you that in the discussions that I've had, there is no solution that's being considered over the others. I think, we have to do this the right way. I forget, it was probably about 5 years ago when we had, there was a big push to build a train up the canyon. And I remember this was right at the beginning of my time in the legislature. And for lack of a better term, I felt like we were being railroaded. And I pushed back really hard on that. And I said, we have to look at all the solutions. We have to take the time to make sure we understand it, and we have to do this right. And so, so we essentially killed that attempt to do it 5 years ago. But we have to be honest too. Something has to be done. The canyons are failing. We've got to address this. And none of the solutions are going to be easy. We're either going to have to limit access, or we're going to have to build infrastructure that's going to be difficult on the areas, and I'll tell you, even the proposal to widen the roads. I mean, we've all driven Little Contwood. There's not a lot of room to widen that road. Are we going to go into the stream or dig out the mountain? And so I guess what I would stress is just we need to make sure we're doing this right. We're taking the time to really understand it and not jump to any solutions before we have all the information.
And can I add something to that too? I agree with what Representative Spenlove said. And Bruce, I think this is a perfect example of how you as informed, engaged citizens help us be better. We may not know every single thing that, is happening in the community, or that a different government official said, but this communication between constituents and your elected officials is really critical to helping us all be better at solving problems. And just as a little bit of background, UDOT made a comment in Infrastructure and General Government Appropriations Subcommittee this week that addressed your question. They said that the $50 million is a down payment on transportation solutions in the canyons generally, but it was not going to a specific approach. The environmental analysis, the EIS, the environmental analysis is going to determine where some of that money goes. But again, just to reiterate, we have to look at what's the most cost effective, what makes sense, that solves the solution, the problem, both in the short term and the long term. And I really think it's important to go through the steps of the process with input from the community and with cost effective, fiscal conservative principles as we move forward.
Okay, I'm gonna move
Bruce,
on here. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'd just like to ask Bruce quickly what he thinks a good solution would be, since he's a resident of the canyon.
Well, we had a lengthy call with representatives of UDOT, that is myself and a few of our neighbors, on that very subject, and have been tracking it closely. We had that call just last Tuesday. They were very, very helpful, very forthcoming, very open to input. And we believe the process itself is very rigorous and impartial. Having learned a lot from that particular call and just what's available out there in the public forum. And there are cost-effective, or shall I say, more cost-effective solutions included in the 5 options. What they call enhanced bus service with and without a road widening provision that we believe would go a long way to solving the problem, along with tolling and perhaps some of the measures that Representative Harrison mentioned early on the powder days. I'm one of those guys that gets up early to get up there quickly. Unfortunately, I'm in the pole position there, but many of our fellow citizens aren't. So we understand the need to have a solution to a big problem that exists today. So we're happy with the process. We believe UDOT is doing a great job of analyzing this, and we just got alarmed, frankly, with the comments that sort of came out of our governor that perhaps there was a predetermined outcome, or at least there was a hint there. So the process should be allowed to exist. There'll be lots of time for public comment from any number of factions. And I'm sure UDOT will come to a measured and intelligent recommendation to the legislature, because funding is a huge issue. Even the cheapest options are in the $350 million range for enhanced bus service for capital costs, and then another $8 to $9 million in operating costs annually. So I guess I'll just close by saying there's a lot of data involved in it, and we'll continue to make our concerns known. And we hope that personally, anyways, I hope, I won't speak for my neighbors, that that an enhanced bus service, which is the devil we know, technologically speaking, combined with some kind of tolling would be a very, very positive step to getting at the core issue of these huge lineups on certain days. It's not all days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
So we are at, just so a heads up for everyone who's following along, at 10 o'clock, we're actually going to let our representatives go and invite our senators in. We felt like splitting it up a little bit would be a little easier instead of having 8 panelists at one time. So we have probably chance for one more question from Kara Robbins. And if you didn't get your question answered this time, we'll do this again when the senators come on. So no worries. We'll make sure to get to all the questions, but let me allow Kara Robbins to speak now. Kara, you there?
Hi. Yeah, hi, this is Kendall Robbins. Kara and I are both here.
Okay, great.
I just wanted to comment, like Bruce was saying, a very credible effort is being done for years by the Central Wasatch Commission, studying what's going on in the canyons, the need for more studies of canyon use. They have been done extensively, and they are being used in coming up with the various proposals. So that it sounded like you guys are talking about doing some efforts that would end up being quite redundant to a very credible process that's already been going on. So these 5 alternatives are all very interesting. They're all very expensive. They all would solve the problem in different ways. And so it's hard to see that one stands out way above the other. But to throw in more alternatives outside of what's already being done through this credible process, I think would be a mistake. So I just wanted to comment, this is already being done and being done very well, and we should augment that rather than, propose all kinds of additional stuff, if that's what's being talked about. Thank you.
Thank you. Great point. All right, we actually do have, let's get to Clive Oliver really quickly, since I think we have time for him as well. Hold on one second, Clive. Okay, you are able to talk now. Clive, you there? I think you might need to unmute.
Yeah, this is actually Norma Oliver.
Okay, great.
We are new to Utah, and I was appalled to learn that we have a concealed and carry allowed in Utah. I don't understand this. We have one of the highest suicide rates in the country, and almost half of those are caused by guns. Why do we have concealed and carry?
Can I take this one?
Sure.
Okay, so I think you're referencing a bill that came out this year, HB 60, that actually just passed out of the Senate, I think yesterday. There were a number of us that shared these concerns, both from our high suicide rate, our high domestic violence rates, and the fact that I think the concealed carry, well, maybe symbolic in terms of safety. It did provide a lot of good information in terms of suicide, and I know that Representative Elison actually put some of that into that bill in a substitute, which is fantastic. But I think a lot of what's missing, if this is going to be signed by the governor, which he's indicated that he will sign it, is that these people who go and apply for these permits or go to purchase guns are subject to background checks. And a lot of those people have no idea that they're actually firearm restricted people. I know there's some legislation. I'm working on a piece, Representative King's working on a piece as well to deal with these types of people who are actually restricted from owning firearms. But I know law enforcement wasn't on board with this bill because to them it's a threat to have more people carrying without permits in a concealed way. And so I'm with you there. I think this bill was a bad choice, and that's why I voted against it.
Millicent?
Yes. So several years ago, the legislature funded a firearms violence study, something the CDC has not been able to study because Congress prohibited it, which I think was pretty ridiculous. So Utah funded that study. We contracted with the Chan School of Public Health at Harvard University to study the connection between firearms and suicide. And it revealed some very interesting data. If somebody owns possesses a concealed carry permit, there's really no correlation between whether or not that person may attempt suicide. We found that there was no correlation between having a concealed carry permit and being any more likely to attempt suicide. And people that are firearm restricted, whether or not they apply for a permit or not, the process of acquiring that firearm has not changed. If they are restricted individuals, they'll still be restricted individuals. I did substitute this bill in the House and took the extra fees that have been building up in this account, and they will now be used for educating firearm suicide prevention, education efforts, public service announcements, and other suicide prevention activities. That's an area that we've put a lot of time and focus into in the state of Utah, and we just received data that Utah has now had 4 years of declining suicide rates. And a big part of that's been focusing on educating the public about safely storing firearms. We've distributed hundreds of thousands of trigger locks, coupons for biometric safes, a public service announcement campaign called Is Your Safety On? So it's something that we're all concerned about, and it's critical for parents particularly to understand locking up their firearm is one of the most effective things they can do to protect their child from dying by suicide, which is the leading cause of death for ages 10 to 24 in the state of Utah. So probably nearing our time limit, but thank you for asking the question. It's a very good, very good, very important topic, and something that I assure you will continue to focus on.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got just a couple more minutes. If anyone wants to raise their hand, we're happy to get to maybe one more. I don't see anyone else with their hands up. So if not, that's okay. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you guys. This is very helpful. I think from our side at the city, we are obviously, our concerns with bills. There have been many studies that show that people trust their local leaders to make decisions when it comes to housing and to kind of zoning. And so generally up at the legislature, we are most of the bills we see maybe seek to take away a little bit of that local ability. And again, the government closest to people, we hear from people on a daily basis on issues from, roads and water and garbage. And, we're talking to these people every day. And so we just would encourage to look at these bills from a lens of maybe, how can we preserve people's ability to trust their local leaders on making these decisions. We certainly understand that there is a housing problem in our state, and we generally have been working towards finding good solutions and working towards making sure we can, people have homes to live in. We want people to come and move to Sandy. We are working on housing projects probably once a month there's a new one. And so certainly with COVID, it's obviously exacerbated, but we just wanted to encourage you guys before you go is to look at these bills that come through just from a lens of, how do we preserve locals' ability to make those decisions? They are elected directly from our residents, just like you guys are. And so we're happy to continue to work with you guys on that, and appreciate the partnership that we have with the legislature and with you guys, especially kind of looking out for us and for the residents, and for spending the time just answering questions for us and answering my texts when I text you on a other daily basis. So I appreciate you guys. I know with COVID, this has been a tricky session. You've had to do a lot by email and a lot by text messaging and a lot by phone calls, but I appreciate you guys being so very accessible during this time. So I'll let you guys jump off and get to your Saturday, and we'll start having senators trickled in, and appreciate you again.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Evelyn.
Deputy Mayor. Thank you to
Thank
Sandy
you
City for
Thank you.
hosting this. Thank you.
so much. Have a great day. Hi, Senator Reby.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. Thanks for joining us today. We'll just give it 1 minute and have everyone, all the senators jump on. So it was a little hard to try to manage 8 panelists. We felt like splitting up by representatives, the House side versus the Senate side would give everyone the opportunity to have a little bit more time to speak. So
Perfect.
we have about 36 attendees joining us, so not too bad for a Saturday morning Zoom meeting.
Yeah, that's Doug Walker. There's my dog. How are you today?
Doing well. This is our first hour. I think went really well with all of our representatives. We had a lot of good questions. So I'm looking forward to see what questions come out for the senators.
Perfect.
Can you hear me okay, Evelyn?
Yep, we can hear you great.
Hey, let's pretend that Dan McKay's on mute and we'll say we can't hear you.
So I did get confirmation from Senator McKay that he was joining, but Senator Fillmore may or may not be joining. He said he kind of had a tentative schedule. So we'll just wait for Senator McKay and kind of get started. And if Senator Fillmore joins us, then that's great. But we won't wait for him.
Perfect.
Well, while we wait for Senator McKay, I just texted him to see if he's jumping on. I'll just kind of explain the process. So we're just gonna start out with just kind of welcome and introductions. I'll let you guys each take some time, just tell us what you're talking about in session. And then after that, we'll just have maybe a little discussion. I have a few questions that I'd like to ask you, and then we'll allow some question and answer from the residents. There's like 32 people on now, so we had have a good turnout. We had a lot of questions earlier about canyon transportation. That seems to be something that people are really watching, I think, during the legislative session. So would love to have a conversation about that. And just, I realized when I started this meeting, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Evelyn Everton. I'm the deputy mayor at Sandy City. So one of my main jobs in my position is to do the government affairs for our city. And so I'm working with our state legislators a lot and kind of flagging bills and asking them their opinions on kind of issues that related just directly to Sandy City. So I really appreciate their efforts on behalf of us at the state legislature. And this is, obviously session is really busy. It's been a little bit of a weird session with everything pretty virtual, but so far it's working okay, I think. And this is Sandy City's very first virtual meeting. So so far I think it's working good. I'm very happy with the amount of attendees that we've had for it being Saturday morning. And so I just appreciate everyone for joining us on their Saturday. And I think what we'll do, maybe Senator Colmore, if you want to just start, kind of let us know what you're working on and kind of what the session's looking like for you. And we'll just start there and see if Senator McKay joins us.
Okay. Well, thanks for putting this on, Evelyn. I always look forward to it. And it's sad that it's not in person and pre-legislative. It was always kind of fun, but this is a great venue too. And I think that's what we found through this session is that although the energy maybe isn't there at the Capitol with everybody out in the halls and constituents coming and meeting with us, that this does present a new opportunity for a lot of the public to weigh in. It's been very good and very interesting in committee hearings to hear from people all over the state on particular issues. So in some respects, there's a lot of things that are good that we'll take forward with us. For me personally, this session, I'm always kind of working on transportation issues and looking at that. And so trying to be part of the discussions with the Canyon solution, as well as infrastructure solutions in the southwest part of our valley and across the state. I've got two bills that are not out yet, but that I'm really working on. One has to do with consumer privacy data. And that really affects the big companies, primarily those ones that sell consumer data, just putting some constraints on that and a framework in place where consumers can get disclosures from those companies on how their data may be used, opt out of that. And then if it's not done within the parameters of the law, giving them a recourse through the Division of Consumer Protection in the Attorney General's office. So that's got a lot of input from stakeholders all over the nation, really, but we're working on that. The second one that I'm excited about is a grant program, which will be specifically targeted to companies that have been most adversely affected by this pandemic. And the way it's getting drafted is that companies who can demonstrate the greatest losses there'll be windows of opportunity to apply for these grants, depending on how much loss you've had and how much availability or what other resources have been available to you or that you've been able to take advantage of from either the state or the feds, so that we can really make sure it gets directed to the companies who, one, have been hurt the most, and two, have not been able to take advantage of those. And then we'll open up windows to expand that as we're able to. And so working on getting as much funding as possible for that, to help the arts, restaurants, there's a whole host of businesses who haven't necessarily been in an industry that got industry specific help. And so those are a couple of the big bills that I'm working on right now.
Great, thank you. Senator Reedy.
Thanks. My name is Senator Reeby. I represent District 8 right next to Senator Cullimore. I am working on a few bills. I can't believe Kirk didn't mention our favorite bill that we're co-sponsoring together. We are co-sponsoring ERA. That's having some struggles getting out of rules, but we can always fight that fight and keep that baton in play. I'm also sponsoring a bill that's going to help with police and mental health. So we have these agencies called MCOTs in Ogden and Salt Lake City. And when police are called, sometimes if it's a health crisis, they are really not prepared to take care of a health crisis. So we have an agency that goes out and they intervene on behalf of mental health issues, and they start to take care of that issue. So that would be something that would be a savings for our state and our communities, because you know, violence and accidental shootings and mental health crises are very expensive. So this was a bill that I really am proud of, and it passed through the House unanimously, and then it passed through the Senate unanimously, but now we're working on some details in the House. So I'm excited to make it better, and hopefully that'll move forward. I'm working on an education bill that will provide us some leeway with our assessments. I think since we didn't take our assessments last year at the end of the year, we are all kind of curious what's going on with our kids and how we are going to best mitigate some of their learning that's been interrupted. So that's something that I'm proud of. And I have a bill that's going to help people who are experiencing housing insecurity with their cars, because if you're living in your car and someone tows it, you just towed away their home. So we're trying to mitigate some of the impacts of that. So those are my three main bills right now.
That's great. So you mentioned education. I think obviously education is always a huge focus for the legislature. It's really where a majority of the budget goes. So if you guys maybe want to just kind of give us maybe just little updates on kind of what the focus is at the legislature on education this year. I'm sure COVID has had a lot of impact on that, and we just love to kind of have a little discussion quickly so they know kind of what the focus is for that.
Well, the state has done an amazing job. When this started to happen, the pandemic, we really weren't sure what was going to go on. So a lot of projects got defunded last year, and then we are in process of refunding them. So we have tried to make all those programs full again, and we have dedicated a large percentage of money. I think it's 6% WPO Kirk. Is that what we're thinking? And then we also have gotten some federal funding, I think $274 million that will help out. But the legislator has really done a great job trying to make sure that our kids are getting what they need. And it's been a pretty banner year for education, even in the midst of this pandemic. There's been a really big push to help with broadband internet all across the state. So that's been I say this is late on the education lap, but actually all the businesses are starting to realize that this is super important, and it really would help our rurals, and it would help our communities to spread us out and have commerce happening at a higher rate all across the country. So I think that it's been a really great year for education, even though we've had a lot of struggles.
Sure, challenges. Senator Colmar, anything you want to add on that?
No, I think Kathleen said it right. You know, the Executive Appropriations Committee in November, I think it was, made that pretty big investment that was hopefully going to be made at the end of last year, and then kind of got wiped out because of COVID. And so, you know, the economy has done really well here in Utah, despite the pandemic, and accepting and recognizing that a lot of people are still really suffering economically. But overall, the numbers have come in well to where we are able to really make good investments, good sizable investments into education. And so that was done back in November. There's still a surplus in the education budget. And so you've probably seen the news about $1,500 they don't want to call it bonuses, but surplus amounts going to teachers this year to recognize the efforts and the difficulty that they're having with having to figure out the online thing and the in-person thing. And so, you know, like you said, Evelyn, we're always working to get that number up, but because of our demographics, it's a struggle to get on par with where we could be or should be nationally. But we really get a lot of bang for our buck. And I really do think that, you know, like you said, it's the number one, it's the largest investment in our budget. And so hopefully that continues. And I think that the passage of Amendment G actually, at least this first little bit, looks like it's gonna, the results of that will be that continued increased investment into education.
That's great. Well, I think, so transportation, specifically Canyon transportation, came up earlier. So I would, if you guys maybe kind of weigh in on your thoughts on that and what's going to happen at the legislature, this session in regards to that. I think all of our residents and people who live up in these areas understand what a problem it is. So we just love to hear from you guys what your thoughts are on that.
So with canyons transportation, the reality is whatever the solution might be, it's going to take a pretty sizable amount of money to get it done. And so UDOT is considering 4 different alternatives right now. And until the EIS is really done, no money can be specifically appropriated to any one of the options. With that said, both the House and the Senate are considering bonding options for transportation and other projects. And, as part of that investment, my job, Senator Reeby's job, is to ensure that if we're going to bond and we're going to, make a pretty large investment into transportation, then we need to make sure that we take care of some of the critical needs, including the canyons. And so even though that the specific solution has not been decided on, we've got to find ways and opportunities to set aside some money to address that. And so that's definitely part of this conversation. As I'm in on these conversations, that is something that I'm stressing, that we need to figure it out. Both canyons really need to be addressed, but primarily and first, Little Cottonwood Canyon.
Great. Senator Reeby,
Thanks. Thanks, Kirk. So today's a powder day, and I took my dog for a walk, and the road is amazingly empty today. Snowbird has done some unique things about making reservations, and that's actually helped the traffic in the canyon. And then Alta's parking was closed by 8 o'clock, so their parking lot was completely full. So that has helped today. So, I mean, maybe we should start looking towards our businesses to change their behaviors, because today was a lot better than it has been. They also did a mid-canyon shoot last night, which caused people to sit in their cars for about 4 hours trying to get home. So that did not work. So there is a lot to look at. Some of the plans that they have made have been for the winter only, and we really need some infrastructure for year-round. When you look at some of the reports that have come back and the surveys, they're asking for bathrooms to be at the trailheads and for our trailheads to be accessible through these alternative measures all summer long. So we are in the middle of that EIS study. It has been studied for now, I think 60 years, because when I researched this, the first study I saw was in 1970. So this is not a unique story, and it's been going on for a long time. I think we definitely do need to do something. We have some federal money that can go to it, as well as some state money. So when that EIS study is done, it will try to dictate where we're going. Please make sure that you are legislators and your local officials for what you think is best, because we are still in the decision-making process.
I'm actually going to allow Kara Robbins to speak. I think he had something to say about this. He mentioned it to the representative, so I want to make sure that he gets a chance to tell you guys as well.
Great.
Yeah, it would be great if I had something good to say. I just was commenting on the last meeting that it sounded like there was some redundant effort with people talking about doing surveys of canyon use and all that kind of stuff, which has already been done as part of the Central Wasatch Commission work. And so I'm impressed with how this whole alternative generation and evaluation has gone. We need to keep going with it and enact whatever it is that falls out as, the better solutions. But I was concerned that we were talking about replicating efforts and duplicating efforts, and that I don't think we ought to do. So I like what I've been seeing so far. Kara wants to say something too.
So I just have a question of clarity, I guess, on the EIS. Are they factoring in, is that study look at simply the current situation, or do they factor in long-term, like climate change? So I'm looking at the ski areas and wondering in 10 or 20 years, what kind of impact either a declining industry might have, if those future kind of scenarios are being considered in those environmental
Like if we keep
statements?
having crummy snow years like this year?
Like if we keep having this kind of a year? Yeah.
I don't know. That's actually an interesting question. I don't know if they are looking for a change in the future. It would be nice if they did have a plan, they could scale it back. I mean, some
Right.
of those options are permanent and they might not be necessary in the future. That's such a depressing thought to me as a skier. So I don't even know if I can go there any further.
Yeah.
And I know they do look prospectively at a lot of things, you know, particularly population growth and increased growth. How much they look at the overall global climate concerns, I don't know on that, actually. That's a good question that I can, you know, I see Andrew Gruber on here. He might know that. Yeah, I know it definitely looks prospectively though. So.
Great point. So obviously, I think people are really watching this closely, this discussion. I do think that so far the process has been really inclusive, and you know, people are able to really weigh in on a lot of different factors there. So we appreciate the efforts that the state has done to continue to allow that interaction. You know, everyone really cares about our canyons and what's going to happen there. So we appreciate that. So I don't see any other hands up. So if you have any questions, this is your chance to ask them about any issue you would like, even if we haven't covered it, you're welcome to. Oh, that worked. Everyone just raised their hand. So I'm going to allow Glenn Johnson to talk right now. And just make sure you unmute yourself.
Okay. I'd like to ask about redistricting. In 2018, the voters passed Prop 4 for the Independent Redistricting Commission. I voted for it in hopes that Salt Lake County would not be remain one of the most gerrymandered counties in the nation. Right now, I have a 20-minute commute to my office at the University of Utah, and I travel through 3 congressional districts there and back. So I'd like to know what's going to happen and if the spirit of that initiative is going to be honored, or if basically we're going to find a way to rationalize keeping things as they are.
So Senator Reevy, I'm not sure if you're involved in those efforts. I'm not on any of the task force or committees right now, but I know that Proposition 4, the Independent Redistricting Group, has been formed now. You know, the Democrats and Republicans and that whole commission has been formed with the input from those parties and those elected officials. And so, you know, I expect that it'll go forward. And, you know, besides that independent commission, I think there will be input and maps drawn from other groups. And so, and then at the end of the day, the legislative group that's tasked with this is going to have to, you know, do their best to take input from everybody and then come up with what seems to be a fair solution.
I am not on any of those committees either, but I can tell you there are some bumps in the road right now because the census had so much impact from COVID and some of the other questions that were on it that we are really struggling to get that data before we can make these decisions. So my concern is that since this data won't be available when they think it usually is available, that might cause some rushing, and that makes me a little concerned. But the commission is starting to be formulated, and I think that it's still early in the really working together right now. I have optimistic views towards it because there's some really good people involved.
Senator McKay, thanks so much for joining us. Sorry about the confusion on the link. Before I let Glenn Johnson go, do you have any input on redistricting, kind of what's happening there? If you don't, that's okay. But
I was going to say, I think it sounds like they've covered everything. So just happy to be here. When I looked at the invite, I saw that I was supposed to be here at 10:15, not supposed to be here at 10. So I'm sorry, I did not read the email as closely as I could have. So there you go.
You probably got a few emails coming your way, so no problem. So I'll just give you a few minutes if you like, just to kind of tell us what you're working on at the session, and then we'll go back to questions.
Well, I would gladly talk about what is the most entertaining thing I'm working on, which is the potential revision of the state flag. but I'm afraid that Kathleen Reeby will come through the screen and beat me up. And as a result, I'll just keep it short and say that's one thing I'm working on. As the chair of the Revenue and Taxation Committee, we're also working on, a tax break and trying to figure out, the right way to do that. I think the legislature's kind of settled on 3 components that we'll do. A child tax exemption credit, and how that works out yet we're still working on. That was part of the ever popular tax reform package that didn't work out. And then we had the other one that was a military retirement exemption, and then we have Social Security income exemption. So we're working on those 3, and I think that's really where the tax policy is going to come down. And then I work on whatever else Kirk Cullimore tells me to do.
Can someone tell me how we got almost every Sandy rep on a Rev and Tax committee? We're very represented on the Rev and Tax committee. I appreciate that. All right, well, thank you for that. We'll just kind of go back to questions. We've been talking, just Senator McKay, just to give you an update on, kind of education. We've been talking a lot about canyon transportation. That's certainly been a big focus for our residents. Law enforcement. So I'm going to go to, unfortunately, this person just has letters. It's MJHN, but I'm going to allow them to talk right now. Just make sure to unmute yourself.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, I understand the legislature's looking at the governor's use of emergency orders and maybe redefining how those are used, what's an emergency really, even looking at the public health orders. My concern is a lot of these are being driven by supposed data, but there's a lot of scientists out there, there's a lot of data out there. Who's doing the data? Is it a self-interest group? Is it, there's just a lot of conflict out there, and yet these, sweeping orders that affect everybody's lives are just being done kind of unilaterally and without a lot of public input about the concerns there. And I'm just wondering where you feel like that's being steered in the legislative session this time.
So I'll start off, but so a bill is being worked on by working groups in the Senate and the House. I know it's going to be, the governor's office has had a lot of input, and the solutions that are coming on are going to be negotiated with the governor's office next week. The concerns are there's obviously going to be emergencies in the future that we can't anticipate, much like we couldn't have anticipated this pandemic. And so we don't want to totally gut the governor's ability to, as an executive, respond to these emergencies. On the other hand, we're almost a year into this particular emergency. And after a certain amount of time, you've got the executive offices that are having to make policy decisions, which should be left to the legislative branch so that the people have more of a voice in what's going on. And so that's what this bill does. It says after a certain time, 30 days is what's anticipated, that if there is an ongoing and continuing emergency, then legislative input is going to be required to continue that emergency. And then legislative input can narrow the scope of what exactly those emergency powers may be used by the executive offices, whether that's the governor's office or the health departments.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that, this has been a really hard time for so many. And I agree with the question that was presented. There is so much information out there. And right when we think we're pinning something down, the moves, when we started going into this, we thought it was going to be worse and then it was better. As a school teacher, going back to school in August was really scary. We had no idea what was going to happen. And thankfully, our kids have done an amazing job, and we haven't seen the spread in elementary schools as well as much as we've seen in our communities. So it's been really hard. And I think that I'm a little cautious with making change to these powers, because hopefully we won't see a pandemic like this again for another 100 years. But if we change the powers too much and we have another emergency like an earthquake, that might hinder our response. So I think we need to look to the future and see that the response to this pandemic shouldn't be dictating our response to some other kind of disaster. So we're trying to keep those perspectives in mind.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to, let's see, we did Sandra Hawk. I'm gonna allow you to talk right now. Just make sure to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. I have a couple of questions. The first one would be directed to Mr. McKay. I was flabbergasted that somebody thought we should change the flag, and I'm wondering why and what the alternative would be. And the second one has to do with the likelihood that House Bill 168 will pass the Senate. So maybe Mr. McKay could talk first.
Well, only if Kathleen Reby gets to turn off her camera so she can like do something else for a minute while I talk about flags.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So
it's been very exciting.
It has been. She likened it on the Senate floor yesterday to a really long line at Disneyland, and when you finally get to the ride, it closes down or something, you know. So I thought that was very apropos. You know, we've been talking about this, Sandra, for about 3 years now. The Utah flag, or you know, flags in and of themselves, and if given another venue, I would break out the PowerPoint presentation and share with you some of the information really that's gone on. And maybe Sandra, I'll do that, and maybe anybody that wants to stick around kind of at the end of the call, I'm happy to share with them some of the background information. But the fact of the matter is, almost I think it's 27 or 28 state flags are blue. And of the 27, 28 state flags are blue. Almost all of them have taken their state seal and placed it on a blue background and called that their flag for a long time. The best flags are flags that are simple, and they're simple enough that a child can draw them from memory. They only have a few colors. They're distinctive, they relate to, and they have symbols that relate to the state and the state subjects and the state subject matter and the key values of the state. The issue with our state flag is our flag is not simple. It composes 9 different colors. It composed on it, and it has details that, when hoisted upon a flagpole and viewed from the typical, viewer's perspective, they cannot see that detail. And so the thought was, look at a simplification. Look at taking what we have that we really love about the flag and incorporating it into a new design. And so that's really the short version of what it is, Sandra. I'd encourage anybody who's interested to Google a TED Talk by Roman Mars. It's in fact, I will go put it in the, I don't know if there's a chat function on this thing, but I can, I'll figure out a way to share it with everybody. But that link posted, then you can go and watch the TED Talk by Roman Mars about city flags. And I think watching that will help identify some of the issues and ways that we can modernize the state flag. So I hope that helps. I know people say, well, don't we have better things to do? I'm currently working on 8 other bills at the same time, and voting and doing everything else. The costs, for the commission will be under $10,000. And that will mostly be, salary and wages of staff that, help receive email and process that stuff. So it's a pretty nominal cost really to do it. So anyways, let's see what comes out of it.
Yeah. Senator McKay, maybe just mention kind of the makeup of that commission, how that's going to work, that this isn't just the legislature is not going to draw up a flag. This is all done by a commission.
Yeah. So the bill itself is a commission that will have a representative from the League of Cities and Towns. We'll have a representative from the Utah Association of Counties. We'll have a representative from the Department of Heritage and Arts. We'll have a representative from the Department of Tourism. We'll have a couple of legislators, one from the House and one from the Senate. And there's a few others that I'm forgetting at the moment. But it'll be a broad swath of people. There'll be a public process that will, collect ideas for the flags. And we're hoping that we'll actually include 5th grade students who are in the process of, in Utah studies. Recently, just last year, Mississippi redesigned their flag, and in their redesign process, they got thousands of submissions from around the world for ideas on their flag. And one of the things that was really exciting about it, I recently talked to a lady who served on the Mississippi Flag Commission, and she said that for the first time in her, 30 years of living in Mississippi at that time, she said she really got a sense for what the community cared about and what was really meaningful for them. And I think they were able to take those thoughts and input and put it into a flag that 74% of the state of Mississippi approved on their ballot measure. They put it on the ballot and asked the people, were they willing to let that be their flag? And 74% of people wanted it. So I think if we go through a process that involves the public and works through that, I think we can do something similar and, do something meaningful for the state.
So can I jump in, Sandra? I also had some concerns about the flag, but the most impactful part of Senator McKay's testimony was that everybody wears a BYU flag or a University of Utah flag or a Real Salt Lake shirt. And so we don't really unify behind our flag. So I thought that was the most compelling argument for me, that this is something that all of us can wear, all of us can be behind, instead of something that's dividing us between like 2 sports teams or stuff like that. So I like that part of that conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. Okay, we're going to go to Anita Bennett now. Just make sure to unmute yourself.
Yeah, actually, this is her husband, John. I just had a question on what were the deficiencies in the U.S. Constitution that you feel will be rectified with the ERA?
Well, we are the 39th state that would be ratifying this. And I think that it's something that might not really change anything, but I think it's a message that we are going to move forward. Utah has some of the largest wage gaps in the country, and this prevents us from shining as being a great place to live as a female. So I think that this is a message that we can all get behind, that we believe that women and men all should be treated equally. My husband just retired, and because I'm working and he has that freedom of we both can earn a fair wage, that it gives us more freedom. So I think it's a family rights issue, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed.
I'll say as well that there's probably more symbolic benefits than actual benefits at this point, because the law has progressed such since this was originally drafted that when women and everybody has pretty much equal rights under the Constitution. But it is symbolic, and I would note also that the language that is in the ERA for the U.S. Constitution is almost identical to language that is already existing in the Utah Constitution. And so, like Senator Reby said, a lot of the concerns that surround the ERA have not really materialized in state law. I've looked into the legalities of this, and I'm not convinced that this furthers the abortion debate or anything like that. And so it really is symbolic, but I think it's important to demonstrate Utah's commitment to supporting the equal rights for women.
All right, thanks so much. I think our last...
Evelyn?
Yeah.
Evelyn, I thought Sandra, also asked a question about House Bill. I think it was 168. I was trying to remember if that's the right bill.
That's what I heard.
Is that what it was? So I thought it was, Sandra, just real quickly, that is the sale of sexual assault kits. I guess there's a way to, again, I didn't know this, but there's a company that is working on creating a tool that allows, women or people who've been, I guess it could be men, who've been sexually assaulted to have a take-home test kit for sexual assault. And there's a prohibition against it is the planning of the bill. I haven't reviewed the bill or the background. It's a House bill. I did look at the status of it just a second ago. It did just recently pass over to the Senate. I would tell you that my personal feeling is, as I look at the bill, I don't understand why it is appropriate to ban the home sale of any product, you know what I mean, that isn't a danger to someone. So, we should really be somewhat careful about what products we prohibit to be sold in total. And so it would have, so that's my bar really, as I look at that bill, is they'd have to get over a really high bar for me to support something like that. I'm not sure. It was really contentious. It looks like it passed on a close vote in the House, and so passed on a close vote in committee. So an idea like this may take a little while to get through the Senate.
I'll also note, Senator McKay, that this is a House bill, and so I don't know if it's a misconception, but a lot of times we get emails about House bills and all that, and the reality is a lot of these bills never make it to the Senate, or by the time they do make it to the Senate, they've changed so much that it's not really the bill that was originally addressed in the emails. But and I haven't really looked at this much like Senator McKay as well, but I expect it'll probably come through the Judiciary Committee, which I sit on. And some of the concerns are that, in principle, I agree with what Senator McKay said, but I think the counter arguments for this is that victims of sexual assault, if they rely on these types of test kits, that maybe they don't seek out the help or the treatment that they might need otherwise. And the evidentiary standard for these home self-test kits is very questionable at best. And so that's the concern. I think that's where the opposition is if a victim of this relies on this solely and then doesn't seek out legal or mental health stuff like that, then it discourages that. And then ultimately, if they do pursue those legal recourses, that they may not have anything that they can rely on evidentiary wise in court.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's go to Janet Wade. I'm gonna allow you to talk and just make sure. Oh, for some reason it says I can't allow you to talk because you're using an older version of Zoom. So let me promote you to a panelist instead. So you may be on camera. If you don't want to be on camera, you can turn off your video, but I will do that right now. There you are. Just make sure you unmute. Janet, just make sure you unmute. You got to hit unmute, yeah.
Thank you for being here, Senators. Representative Ray is working on a bill on the realignment of state agencies, and advocates are worried that not enough input has been given from constituents on this issue, and it hasn't followed the typical process of an interim study. How will you as senators gather enough information to vote responsibly on this bill, as passing of this bill will basically set the process in motion? And in a time of pandemic, we're really concerned about this move, especially the Department of Health to Human Services.
First of all, Janet, is it Irish or Scottish?
It's Yorkshire.
It's Yorkshire. Even I've insulted you. I feel badly.
Yeah.
Well, my grandmother was an immigrant from Scotland, and so I, on a regular basis, I haven't heard her voice for a long time, but for just a glimpse, it was good to hear the accent. So, in fact, you'll laugh. They had to put me in speech therapy because nobody could understand a word I said when I was a kid. So, it's interesting. The realignment of departments and those kinds of things is an issue that comes up every year, and again, it's a House bill, and it's one of those things that we haven't had a lot of briefing on. I think that I'd welcome, and I'm sure Senator Reeby and Senator Cullimore would as well, I wouldn't mind hearing some of those concerns. If you want to send me an email about some of those concerns in that alignment, because as we're putting together, and this is a little insight for everybody on the call, House members tend to beat up on the Senate, and the Senate, House sometimes is a little deferential to themselves, and they'll pass their bills or do whatever. And so when a House member sends their bill over to the Senate, that's when things tend to get refined, maybe is the best word to say it. And I'm finding the same thing happens on the Senate now that I've been on the Senate side for 3 years, that, you send an idea over from the Senate and your idea gets refined by the House. And so I'd love to get that information, and maybe we can help refine their process.
Sure. The Disability Law Center, Utah Health Policy Project, and the Legislative Coalition for People with Disabilities have all kind of voted as organizations that we should wait and really study the issue. But this bill, although they say that is what it would do, it actually would set the process in motion. So we're just concerned.
And as I understand, that was kind of a new governor administration priority, is to kind of look at these things and find where they could, I don't know, streamline things, I guess, or something like that. But I appreciate that input, and we'll look for your email and see how this process goes.
I'll send you the information.
I also have concerns about that.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I also have concerns about that. Right now we have a 10-year waiting list for some of these services, and it is really concerning. But when I hear about what we're not doing and the deficits we do have in this agency, sometimes I'm like, maybe we do really need to look at this. So change is always scary. We just did a big change in the education world. So I definitely feel that angst, but I think there is room for improvement because we are really not doing some of the best work we can. And I think some of the issues that we have are being crammed into departments that maybe can't really address them as well as they should. So I'm very thoughtful about how this progresses, and please share your thoughts with me. Thank you.
Hey, Evelyn, is there a way that I can share a link on like a panel situation?
I think we chose not to do a chat box just because it's really hard to monitor all the different chat boxes, but
I usually get called a lot of entertaining names in the chat.
Yeah.
I always really enjoy them, but
it's always kind of tricky I know, and try to do Q&A and chatting at the same time. So let me just change her back. Okay, anyone else have questions? I don't see anyone else with their hand raised, but now's your chance if you've got a question. So raise your hand. Oh, here we go. Let's see, we've got Barbara Antonetti. I'm gonna allow you to talk, and just make sure to unmute yourself.
Hi, first of all, I'm a public school teacher, and I want to say thank you for funding education and doing all that. And I taught 4th grade for many years, both in Wisconsin and Utah, and yes, our flags are very similar. But one of the cool things about the flags is it teaches a lot of symbolism of our state for the kids. And I was just thinking when you said it would be a big cost, pretty sure all the classrooms in my school have a state flag in it. So then schools are now going to have to buy new flags for the classroom. Just putting it out there. It's going to cost more money than you think to change it. And I was born in Delaware, which is a flag that is a different color blue, and it does stand out. So
I can agree with you on one thing. Every project I've ever started tends to cost more than I ever thought it was going to when I first started. So I think that's probably a fair statement. The Flag Commission itself, though, is focused just on potentially the design side of things. The question as to whether or not, how we replace the flag or what that looks like. I mean, but to your point, like, at the state level, we're replacing flags all the time. Flags that we have on flagpoles last about a year for most private residences. Flags that are flown at the Capitol because of its elevation and because the canyon winds, they last about 30 days.
But I'm talking about the physical flag inside my classroom. I have an American flag on one side and a state flag on the other. And I've had that my whole school career. So I think that's a pretty common theme. We've got a lot of classrooms in the state. And yes, you've given us more money this year, but we're still not up to the national level. And it's going to cost schools more money. And that's money that we don't need to be spending.
I totally appreciate that, which is why in the bill, we actually have the ability for, or at least the consideration that we might have a historical flag as well as a modern flag. And, we've talked about how we might name those two. And I honestly don't think that there's a need to really remove the state flag, the current state flag from your classroom, because for your points, I think they're great teaching elements. They're phenomenal that way. By that fact, it's a great state seal and will still be a state seal, and there won't be anything wrong with really
Right,
using.
and I understand the state seal versus the state flag, but it's just nice that it hangs there. The kids get excited about it, talk about the things on it. I know it sounds weird to hear that 9-year-olds get excited about things on the flag, but when they notice it and they're like, oh, well, that's what that means. And I can remember in elementary school in Delaware learning about that flag. Do you know what I mean? And what it means.
But Barbara, you're highlighting the problem, which is you have to actually point stuff out for them to realize what it is, or that it was even on there.
But I learned that in elementary school and I still know it. You know? And so I know what I'm looking for. And I can remember talking to my kids about different flags, my own personal children. They're adults now. But that's just something to think about. That's going to be a cost for a lot of schools.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Senator McKay, you probably had no idea what you were walking into on this.
No, the one thing I do know, and I actually love it. It surprised even the people who say, who hate the idea of having a new flag. I mean, like, loathe it. They're telling me that the flag is unimportant, it doesn't matter, and they want to fight like crazy about the flag, right? which just shows you the flag does matter. And it is really important, and that people really care about it. So the fact of the matter is, like, it is a big deal. How we define ourselves is a big deal. Our flag does matter. And, if it can accomplish all the things that we wanted to accomplish at the same time, modernizing to meet the current flag standards, I think it's great. I appreciate, and I lost her name. Brooke. I was just to say, I appreciate the acknowledgement of, the Herculean effort really to get education funding in place. I mean, this is a red letter year, and I've seen a lot of, I guess it's really been my legislative career. I've just seen a lot of commitment to education funding over the whole time that I've been here. Trying to catch up with national level is always going to be an illusory promise or illusory goal. I think the benefit we have here in the state of Utah is we have great teachers, and that we're in a situation where we can continue to acknowledge it and keep it as one of our #1 priorities in the budget.
That's great. Well, I don't see any more questions. If anyone wants to raise their hand, they've got just a few more minutes. If not, we'll just maybe kind of wrap up. If there's any parting wisdom you guys would like to share with us on your way out. I think, actually we did get one more question. Let's go to Steve Van Maren. I'm gonna allow you to talk, just hit unmute.
Good morning. I, for one, would like to see Senator McKay's slideshow, so I'm willing to stick around. Thank you.
Okay.
Delightful. Thank you, Steve. That makes one of them.
It is actually, but I watched him give it on the Senate floor, and there is a lot of good information there. So it is worth, I think if you do have a lot of questions or concerns about it, it's worth staying on and getting to enjoy that presentation.
Steve, it's so nice to hear your voice. I've missed seeing you and I've been wondering how you are. So I'm glad you're doing well, and it's nice to hear your voice.
She never says that about me, Steve.
Never.
Well, as we wrap up, I think I'm curious from you guys, having this session be kind of a very virtual, what going forward do you think we should keep from the changes that were made during COVID in future sessions?
Well, I mentioned this earlier, but I think in the committee rooms, having that virtual option is awesome. We've been able to get a lot more participation, I think. It, to a degree, and I hate to say this, but it's never going to replace the personal interaction. You know, that's difficult. And honestly, having a committee room full of people staring you down on a particular vote is more persuasive than a bunch of names on a screen, you know.
Mhm.
So there is some benefit to showing up still when we're able to do that more in full, and you know, and having those conversations with constituents face to face, with stakeholders face to face. There's just a lot more you can convey that way. But you know, there's a lot of convenience for participating in the legislative process through Zoom and WebEx and stuff like that. And you know, I think, I don't know if it was said, but the Utah legislature, I think, is the first legislature ever to convene 100% virtually, back when we did that in April. And so in that respect, there's a lot of, you know, that's another thing to consider with the emergency powers bill, is that, you know, who knows what the next emergency may be, but this new technology allows us to gather from all over the state and pretty much a moment's notice. So a lot of that is very nice.
I'd have to agree with Kirk. It has been nice to have more people participate from farther away, and instead of taking off a whole day, it's just maybe taking off an hour and being a part of the process. As far as, you know, working through our bills, sometimes that has been hard because you can't have as many people in the hallway chatting with you at the same time. And I think that a hybrid would be fantastic I would love to keep that virtual part going forever so that anybody that wanted to join could join virtually.
Yeah, I think especially for people who work or have children, that's at least they're able to weigh in, where before there just no way they probably could.
Well, I hope it's increasing engagement. I hope it's increasing engagement. You know, we have a legislature that we really do want to hear from you. We really do. I mean, sometimes it's really hard to get like 9,000 emails about a flag because we have other things going on. But you know, we really do want to hear from people, and so hopefully this will get people more engaged and they can access this easier. You know, we try to be transparent, we try to be open, we try to really show what's going on. And you know, when people say they don't really understand it or they didn't know what happened, I'm confused because we do have a conduit for all of that, and we have, but maybe this is a better process and people will be more engaged. And so I hope it increases engagement.
Okay. Did you want to add anything to that?
Oh, I totally agree. Everything that said was, yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and if our residents watching don't know, you really can just click in. You can participate in any committee hearing. You can, I think sometimes it has video, sometimes just audio, but I mean, it's really is a really nice feature tool that we have this year. You can also track bills. You'll actually get emails that will tell you the process. So we're really lucky in Utah. There's a lot of states that you actually have to drive to the Capitol to get them to print out a bill. If you even want to see a bill, the fact that you can even read a bill online is actually not that common across the states. And so we're really lucky that I mean, to whatever level you would like to be involved in the legislature, you absolutely have a lot of ability to track bills, to weigh in on bills. Certainly, if you don't want to do that, you can send emails or texts as well, but there is a lot of opportunity to be involved if you would like to. And with this virtual, it makes it definitely much easier. No having to find parking anymore, which is nice. All right, well, that looks like we're wrapping it up. There's no more questions, but Senator McKay, if you want to give your presentation, we can start that. And anyone who wants to stay on, happy to do that. And we're just really thankful for you guys joining us, taking your Saturday. I know it's a busy time of year for you, but this really is a great opportunity for our residents to get to just hear from you and see your faces and kind of just know you by name. And we appreciate you taking the time to do that.
Thanks for having us, Evelyn.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. I will not be staying around for the flag conversation.
She's already seen it.
About.
Okay, everybody's there. Let's see. I'm going to see how many people stay. Let's see how many people stick around. You know, I don't want to make this too long, obviously, but you know, we're shedding people like crazy though, so we're down to 21.
That's right.
No, it's okay. Okay, so let's talk for just a minute. I'll try and keep this really quick for everybody. But you know, this is a slide deck about the Utah flag and all of her, you know, in full confession, before I go, this is my closet at home. So when people ask me, why do I care about the flag or why do I pay attention? Like, that this is an illness for me more than anything else. I've studied and spent a lot of time. So here we are.
You collect flags then? That's cool. Okay.
A flag's basic purpose. A flag's purpose is to represent a place, an organization, or thing, generally on a rectangular piece of cloth to be seen at a distance, often moving and reproduced in quantity and in many sizes. It's interesting when you think about like the actual definition and like its meaning. I felt like it was really important to like see what we're trying to accomplish. And when you think about it being at distance, being moving, it'll really help you understand, some of the criteria that kind of comes next, right? State flags. These are the 50 state flags that are available. And you can see kind of, as I talked about earlier, that, just over half of them are blue. And then, when you add in the number kind of at the bottom that are really just their state seal and its various meanings to it, you can kind of get a sense for, how common the blue background is with the state seals. I recently went to a conference back in, I say recently, it was a year and a half ago. I went to a conference and at the conference, they had on one side of the hall, it was a conference for state legislators. One side of the state hall, or one side of this hall room was the top half, like the distinctive flags. And then on the other half was the blue flags. And it was crazy, but everybody was walking along the distinctive flags and you could almost pick it out immediately. Like Maryland is this flag right up here. It's so distinctive, but that flag is everywhere, right? And, you can talk about South Carolina, the Colorado flag, Arizona, like these flags, they stand out, everybody recognizes them and everybody talks about them. The other side of the room, on the other hand, nobody was looking at, nobody was talking to. And so I decided the blue flag, maybe they felt lonely. I'm going to go over there and talk to them. And I was pulling out, and I started by trying to find the Utah flag, and I had to pull back, the flags from the poles. I think I went through 20 of them. No, I'm sorry. I went through a bunch of them, 5, 6, before I finally found the Utah flag, because that's how undistinctive it is in a room full of other blue flags. So there are 5 basic principles according to the North American Vexillological Association. 1, keep it simple. It has to be so simple that a child can draw it. You should be able to draw it on a card that is 1 by 1.5 inch is the size of the flag, and a child should be able to draw it from memory. 2, use meaningful symbolism using colors or patterns or whatever it might be so that the flag is closely related to the symbols that people care about. 3, use 2 to 4 basic colors, right? And you stay focused on the basic color palette set. 4, no coloring or seals. Never use any kind of an organization seals. And one of the reasons for that is the seal itself is meant for a piece of paper. It's printed as part of a letterhead. When it's on a piece of letterhead, it's very readable. When it is on a flag waving at distance in the wind, it is not. 5, be distinctive or be related. And I like to change the last word when I'm in a small group like this. It's be distinctive or be forgotten. And it's really interesting, but having, when you go back, and I'll show this to you here, but if you look at our Utah flag, right, first of all, you got to find it, you're visually, right? So I'll highlight it for you so you can find it easily. But if you look at these flags that are well thought of, that are important to the brands for the states they represent, they follow those rules almost to a T, and there's certain exceptions, right? So the California Republic, certainly you have seen a hat or of that bear somewhere, right? And while the California Republic, most people, and there's a lawmaker who tried to do this not too many years ago, just remove the California Republic from the flag, you'd still know what state it is, which is interesting because nobody looks at California and thinks of a lot of bears being there, but that's the California Republic, right? Mississippi just went through and redesigned their flag, and kind of see it here on the screen. And they just did this. This is the flag I talked about earlier that was adopted by the voters with 74%. So in 2001, so this information is a little bit old. They haven't updated this survey. They ranked the flags based on a scoring, with 10 being possible and 1, being the lowest. Utah ranked in as the 36th most interesting flag in this study, and this were experts and individuals, and they got thousands of inputs. So these were just some flags that kind of, follow the basic distinctive principles. But recently I went down to I did a trip with my family down to Four Corners, and these are the 4 flags that are on the 4 corners, right? So you've got Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. And when you are looking at the flags at the 4 corners, ours is the least distinctive. It's the least interesting of all the flags that are up there. And as a result, it kind of convinced me at that time that maybe we could do some things that are different, right? Colorado is interesting because, it has the blue of its skies, the white of its snow. It's got this gold here in the middle. Colorado is one of the largest producers of gold in the country. And they broke a little bit the rule of the sea, but it captures the gold and the sunshine and all those things, so they get away with it. I don't know if you've Googled Colorado hat before in your life, or if you've ever been through the Denver, Colorado airport. This flag is on everything. It's on everything. They use it everywhere. New Mexico, same thing, extremely distinctive. The 4 points that point in 4 different directions represent a sacred number 4 for the Zia people. It's an indigenous tribe there in New Mexico, and it represents the 4 points of a day, the 4 divisions of life, 4 sacred obligations. This is a very symbolic and important symbol in the state to the people of the state of New Mexico. And it's distinctive, stands out. It's on everything in New Mexico. Arizona, same thing. This thing is on everything. And my question for anybody on the call who doubts its interest is, when was the last time that you saw a Utah flag on a hat, on a shirt, on anything? It just isn't there. Really quickly, people rally behind the ideals and principles that a flag represents. It needs to be designed well, but it also needs to represent the right things. So I just, for fun, on Amazon, I actually ordered one of these. I don't have it here with me today. I ordered one of these. This is a hat you can go and buy if you really love the state seal, but nobody's wearing this hat. I don't even think my grandpa would wear this hat, bless his heart, and he loves Utah. So, the funny thing is, when you go outside of Utah and you ask, what are the things that really define us as a state? If you're at Disneyland, for example, you're going to see our sports teams on people. And, because I have a bias in my household against the University of Utah. When we were at Disneyland not too long ago, my son said, "Oh, there's somebody from Utah." I said, "Oh, yeah, cool." But he's like, "Yeah, but we won't talk to him because they have a U hat on." And I thought, boy, that's terrible. One, I brainwashed my children, fortunately. But another thing, it's interesting though, that when we're outside the state of Utah, the things that we wear around to public places to tell people where we're from, they're the symbols that divide us the most in the state of Utah, like Kathleen was talking about. So what does our flag represent, and what's meaningful to our state? And so we just kind of took some of the symbols and grabbed them for this graphic. And by the way, for those of you who are still listening, the branding genius behind the Utah Jazz, his name is Ben Barnes, and he lives in South Jordan. I recruited Ben, and the Utah Jazz volunteered him to help with some of these design concepts that you'll see here in just a second. But we have the honeycomb. Obviously, the beehive is an important part of our state and our state symbology. We have the mountains. We have the red rocks of southern Utah and the sago lily. Its persistence, for those, Sandy has Sago Lily Drive, and so maybe more of you are aware of it than others, but the fact that the pioneers were able to sustain themselves when the Mormon crickets were, taking on their crops, and they were able, the Native Americans taught them to eat and cook and make things with the sago lily to survive. We have the compass. We frequently talk about in Utah that, that we're an example to the rest of the country on many things. And, we think of ourselves that way, and the North Star and the ability to kind of focus on, true north and being focused on what's important. So what could our flag represent? If you take out of our flag, industry, perseverance, leadership, okay, those are 3 possibilities, right? If you take industry apart and you say, okay, well, we got the beehive, which represents hard work, economy, community, the hexagonal cell, which in architecture it's one of the strongest form factors. that's used in architecture. So, to represent harmony of the beehive, it represents strength and balance. Perseverance, the sago lily itself, the beauty, the sacrifice, survival, peace, all of those things. Leadership, the compass star, the conscious of the nation, inspiration, guidance, the crossroads of the West, and how would we incorporate those things into a flag? And what colors might we pull out of our existing flag to create a flag that's distinctive? We have the red, which could represent the southern Utah and the national parks, and maybe our valor and strength. The blue, our skies, our lakes, our rivers. Perseverance, the white with the snow-capped mountains, innocence, purity. Yellow, gold, the beehive, the honeycomb. So if we took those kinds, I'd spend more time on this, but I'm trying to get you out of here before you have to eat lunch. But if we focused on leadership, what could taking these colors and we focused on leadership, what could we do with the state flag? Okay, these are some ideas, right? If we took those colors off of our existing flag and focused on that North Star and that star and how it relates to us, in another situation, I'd love to run a poll and see, where everybody comes down, which flag they like, right? But these are just the concepts that I thought were meaningful that the Jazz put together. So what if we focused instead on the sago lily and perseverance? And how could we incorporate the colors that we were talking about there and bringing it here? I really like some of these where it talks, where it shows the crossroads of the West, right? I like this as well, kind of bringing in, into a center and focused on the flag with, really cool because you have the big white, maybe mountains going off into the side and maybe the red on the bottom. I don't know. Some of the reasons I like some of these as well. What if we focused on industry and made the beehive, kind of a focus and stayed around the beehive and how, the beehive might look as a center focus. I really, there's some things I really like about this flag, maybe this one or, just different components, but I really like the red rocks of Southern Utah and, the things that we have going on in the southern part of the state. You got the white capped mountains of the Wasatch Front, and our blue skies along with the industry, the sago lily. Maybe you could change out the sago lily for a star. I've seen that as well. And then, thought we'd have fun by just putting some of these things on a hat and a shirt and just looking at a flagpole and see, how does it change how we look at it, right? And I'll flip through these really quickly. But you get the idea that there's more potential in our flag and in our brand. I tend to really like this one, by the way, when it's on a shirt. My only bias against it is it's still blue. And so that's my own individual bias. That doesn't mean that's what will end up winning the day, but is another one that I thought was really cool as well. And then I thought, well, maybe what if we took the 50 states and we took Utah and we put her up here with these other distinctive flags? How would we do? How would we, kind of rise to the top as far as being distinctive and related to the state? And so, boy, I really like the way these guys stand out and the way they're different when you compare them to these flags here. Man, I really love that hex cell on this one. This one this flag is just so clean, but it's still blue. So I'm going to have to think about that. My bias against blue is as it's my favorite color because I'm an Aggie, but just anyway, here's another one, again, focusing on leadership, another one based on leadership, on the perseverance again. I'm flipping through these faster now, but then I thought, well, how cool would it be if I could look at some of these at the four corners and how would we relate, if we put our flag against those at the four corners and, what that might look like. So anyways, this is, describes the bill that I described earlier, and I can talk through concerns. And thank you.
Hey, Senator McKay. So Kara Robbins, I think, wanted to maybe say something really quick. So I'm going to let
speak on.
Well, actually, it was probably from before, but I do.
Oh, okay.
I had a very quick comment looking at him. I guess I am a supporter of change. I've never liked our flag. Not being a native, not being a native Utahn, what struck me looking at all these flags, for me personally, the environment here is probably one of our biggest resources. So I like the mountain kind of effect in them. I see a lot of Mormon reference and very little Native American reference. I'd like to see more of those. More Native, less, I mean, all those qualities you talked about, I know are sort of universal, but.
Well, and what's interesting, and I've seen iterations of different flags, Kara, because I think you bring up a great point. One of the interesting things about, I've seen some iterations of some different flags. I didn't incorporate them here for this presentation, but I've seen some different iterations that have a different number of peaks on the mountains,
right,
and a different number of stars, and a configuration of stars. I agree with you. I think trying to capture the historical, believe it or not, the beehive itself is not a Mormon reference. People think that it is, but historically it's not. It's actually, believe it or not, it's actually a Masonic reference from history. That, you know, the industry or the ability to work together to solve common problems is actually, and the beehive symbiology actually goes back to ancient Israel. You know, so, I mean, from many standpoints, I know that it might be perceived as being a Mormon influence, but it just goes back deeper. And I can't imagine a flag, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which side you're on, that doesn't include the beehive somehow. But I think, and if you go to my Twitter feed right now, I'm getting notifications like crazy as we're sitting here. There's a big debate going on about some of this stuff, and I'm learning things all the time right now, and it's been really interesting. So I just throw that out to you, that some of the things that we take as maybe Mormon symbols may not actually be that way. Even the Sego lily itself is a Native American, you know, shout out to a past of where the Native Americans and the, you know, and the settlers who were pioneers coming in from the state, how they worked together really to survive. And I think that's also important as well. But your point is well made. I want to make sure that what we do honors our past and our future.
Well, go
Yeah.
for it. Keep up the good work.
And I don't mean to suggest that we need to erase all Mormon history. That's really not what I'm thinking about. But it just seemed like so much white culture was being highlighted, and not enough environmental and, you know, Native aspects that go into it. I also want to comment on the colors. So we've got the traditional, you know, red and blue and gold, but what about the oranges and the lighter sky blue that we have like on some of the license plates that would sort of make it stand out? And are there color, certain kind of colors, tones that you don't want to use?
I don't have an opinion as to, again, these flags that you saw here were just, what if we took simple colors from our existing flag and incorporated them? So that was, it's really for demonstration process, because when I got with my colleagues and we ran through what was clear from the previous 3 years, I was shadow boxing with my colleagues on this issue. They did not, there was fear about what it could become. And their minds were pretty, you know, didn't really have a vision of how broad or how we could look at things differently. And so these are just, you know, some ideas. But to your point, I mean, I'm not married to anything at this point. And that's the thing I hope everybody recognizes is, from my standpoint, I'm agnostic about anything other than trying to find good guiding principles and letting those principles, you know, drive things. And I think you make a couple of great points, right? Maybe we can get creative with colors. Maybe we can get creative with, you know, with ways that we include, you know, imagery that reminds us of our past.
Orange, red rock color definitely yells Utah. I mean, that's huge, I think.
Yeah. And the blue sky. I mean, there's just nothing better than our blue skies, our white mountains, and our orange rocks.
If I could capture the color of a sunset and put it on a flag, I'd do it all day.
Exactly. But you know what? I also am a teacher, and I also think that symbology and flags are super important, and I am not opposed. As a matter of fact, I think we need to change our flags often to represent our changing state. And so I'm totally behind you, and I think it's an awesome effort. And I love the simple lines. So good on you. Thank you.
Thanks, Kara. I appreciate that. You know, it is funny how married we are and how averse to change many people are. And so I am sympathetic to that. And but I appreciate your words. I've written down now a couple of things you thought just to add to things I want to make sure we accomplish. So I appreciate your feedback.
Awesome. Thank you. This has been awesome.
All right.
Well, we'll wrap it up. I appreciate everyone for staying, and thank you, Senator McKay, for sharing that. I do think there is some really important information, and you know, people are very divided. Oh, actually, do you mind staying to answer a couple of other questions? I guess I got another question.
You're good.
Do you mind staying to answer one more?
Go ahead.
Okay. Sandra's back.
I just wanted to say he convinced me.
Oh, there you go.
And I grew up in New Mexico. I've seen those Four Corners flags a lot, and your point is well taken. Thank you so much for the presentation.
I'm trying not to be emotional about it, but thank you, Sandra.
You're very welcome.
Well,
I would gladly come and visit your classroom if you ever wanted a classroom visitor to come and talk about it.
That's a great idea. All right. Well, I think that's everything, and we just appreciate you taking the extra time. I think it is really helpful when people take the, hear your presentation. I think it helps people visualize what it is you're trying to accomplish, and that we can really honor all of our symbols and still come up with something new and modern and that people want to wear on a t-shirt. I have a lot of family members in Texas, and they wear their flag very proudly down there. And I'm jealous. I want to wear my flag very proudly as well. So,
Evelyn, you've inspired me a little bit. This conversation has inspired me a little bit. I'm going to figure out a way to make a video, because this is
great idea.
And something we can share, because this is important enough that I want to make sure people kind of get what we're doing. So anyways, thank you all.
Okay. Thanks so much. Hope you have a great weekend. And thanks everyone who stayed, and we appreciate the time, the effort to be involved and understand what's going on with the legislature. Again, I hope you have a great weekend, and thanks again for joining us. Bye.